Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. Successful leaders make self-care a priority so that they can perform at their best. Sure, that sounds good, but for some managers, self-care can actually be laced with guilt. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. When managing a business, it can be difficult to find much downtime, family time, or just you time. So when the opportunity does arise, why is it so often accompanied by pangs of guilt? Mark LeBusque is a Harvard-trained consultant, author, and founder and director of The Human Manager. He's a management culture disruptor with a very simple message: be human. And needing to recharge is human. Experiencing different environments, people, and enriching activities are incredibly beneficial for the self that you bring back to work. Mark has learned his own lessons by embracing the self-care conflict, and he has 5 to share. And he begins by telling me about his own COVID-related experience.
There was a moment in time, I think lockdown 3 maybe. They're all sort of rolled into each other. But
That's right.
I said to Alison, my wife, who runs a small accountancy practice, why don't we go and live somewhere else for a month? And let's experiment with how we can blend our work into our life, as in the life design piece. So we headed off to a lovely little town called Deloraine in north central Tasmania for a month. And we worked 3 days a week. And for the other 4 days, we got out and about and saw some of the lovely sights of Tassie. It sort of just hit me that why not take the opportunity to experiment with how life could be? And so that's what we did it was partway through January this year to partway through February, we did that, and it was an incredible experience.
You had some self-doubt though initially, didn't you? A little voice that was telling you not to do that?
Oh, absolutely. It was, don't be stupid. This isn't the way that work is. So, we've got 2 filing cabinets in our head, a bad news one and a good news one. The bad news one was throwing stories at me. Your clients won't like it. You won't like it. You'll get in each other's way. What's going to happen back at home? So there was a lot of doubts, but there was just something, my intuitive mark, my gut feel was go and experiment like you tell people to do and take some data from that could help you and others in the future.
Well, from taking that opportunity, you learnt 5 things to help silence that little voice in your head. Tell us about the first one.
It starts with self, and you can't be good to other people if you're not good to yourself. So sometimes we confuse the word selfish with self, and I take the last 3 letters of selfish and do some things for yourself that fill your cup up. Then you can be good for and to other people. So that was the first one. Don't feel like this is selfish and self-indulgent. Feel like you're doing it because you're filling up your cup.
Well, the second lesson you learnt is that it's a bumpy ride. What do you mean by that?
So not everything's going to go well. In our minds, we would like to think that this is just going to be cruisy and everything's going to work. Well, no, there were issues along the way. There were some issues around technology and bandwidth, and I'm wondering what my clients are thinking. I'm wondering if they think I'm professional enough. So you just have to absorb those things. And I say hold your nerve, because that's sort of the way life is today. It's not everything's perfect and is rosy. So when the bumps come, you ride them, you learn from them, and you get better as a result of that.
Well, thirdly, you say that you learned not to wait for that event. What do you mean by that?
Most of us make some sort of change, significant change, when a life event occurs. Let's say it's a health event. Let's say it might be, a tragedy in the family or something like that. And I have a view now at the ripe old age of 54 that I'm past half time. And don't wait for something to go wrong before you decide that getting some perspective on what's really important to you is the time to do it now. So, lots of people will resonate with this. Don't wait for that event. Get out in front of that event and start to live a life worth living.
You also say to clean out your bad news filing cabinet. How do we do this?
First thing we've got to understand is that as humans, we have between 12.5 and 60,000 thoughts a day. 95% of those are recurring and 80% of them are negative. They come into our heads all the time. I call it the 2 A's. It's awareness and adjustment. When you're having that thought that's come out of the bad news filing cabinet, don't do that because of this. First of all is to be aware and go, is that useful for me to think that right now, or useful for others, or not useful? And then secondly, the second A is adjustment. How do I need to adjust in the moment to change that story? And literally, I call this, take a piece of paper out of your bad news filing cabinet and run it through the shredder. Because we've got too many of them in there, not enough in our good news and too many in our bad news. So shred some bad news with the 2 A's.
And finally, you referred to this a little earlier, but you say that the biggest lesson for you was to remove the last 3 letters from the word selfish. Tell us a bit more about that.
So when I've made some big decisions in my life, selfish has been hanging over my head and I'm like, I'm not going to do it then. But what I've learned is that if you take those last 3 letters off and it becomes about self, and I think all of this work starts with self, is that sometimes you've got to make decisions that won't be popular for others, but you've got to make them in order to demonstrate leadership. So getting people to start to think about, at the moment, am I saying it's selfish because I don't want to do it or I'm scared I'm going to upset someone, or is it make it easier for me to avoid doing the work? Remove those 3 letters. Think about yourself. Think about if you're looking after yourself well, then you'll be able to look after others well too. Particularly with my clients, it happens particularly with females, really suffer from this one. They feel like they have to provide for everybody else before they look after themselves. And I think that there's some real work to be done there as well.
Well, Mark, for business owners who are still concerned about carving out time for themselves, what would you say?
First of all, stop trying to be the martyr and the hero and saving the day and all this sort of, because they're all the stories that we create that I need to be there just in case something goes wrong. I want you to think about this. What if your story is, I need to be there just in case I'm not there and something goes right? If things are going right when you're not there, it means you're running a really good team and a good business. And the other thing I'm going to say is, this is pretty morbid, but you're a long time dead. So don't wait for the event. Get on and live your life and role model what you would like to see your people doing as well.
That was author, speaker and coach Mark LeBusque. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.